Redemption. What is it? Why do we need it? And how does it show up in our lives? I'm Mr. Fox. Thanks for being in today. Yeah, I've been doing some thinking lately about this topic. It's something I've wanted to cover for a long time. Get into. I just think that this is one of those things that once again it applies to all of us in a variety of different ways. And I think it's one of those themes that shows up in our lives at different points. But redemption, I think, comes about miraculously and also in the most ordinary kind of way as well. I think there's small acts of redemption all around us. I think there's small acts of redemption that we carry with us each and every day. Sometimes it's the small things. It's just bearing through, you know, the trivialities of each day and the mundane aspects of life and living. Sometimes just living life is in and of itself redemptive. And it's a redemption story. So, where does it start and why? Why do we need it? Why does it help us function? Well, why does it help us live? Because if you're like me, you think redemption, well, that means or implies that something happened that was not a great thing. Something that knocked you off, knocked you down. Somebody that knocks somebody down. And, it implies that, okay, something happened to somebody, maybe by their own cause, or maybe it was outside of their hands. But typically, when it comes to redemption, there's usually this understanding or some sort of implicit understanding that the person is looking to regain something that they've lost, something that has been taken from them that they've lost, or something that has been tainted, right? I mean, it could be a reputation. It could be getting back in good graces with somebody after a lapse in judgment, a betrayal, an affair, uh, lying, cheating, stealing. It could be a number of many things, um, but it's it shows up, and we need it, and I think we all ask for it because at some point, I believe in all of our lives that we fall down, we fall off, or we have, if nothing else, we have moments and little detours where we're not our best versions of self, right? I mean, I'm part of the human experience, I think, is to fall down occasionally because that's how we learn and that's how we grow, hopefully, and that's how we transform into something new or a newer version of ourselves that hopefully has made amends and has atoned for that slip up or that downfall or whatever it might be that led us to asking or hoping for redemption. Redemption shows up in all kinds of stories. It's in our mythologies, it's in our movies, it's in, you know, you see it in sports, you see it in pretty much just about everywhere. And that archetypal, um, you know, uh, deal that has to deal with the hero's journey that was coined by a guy by the name of Joseph Campbell. Um, you hear this a lot, the hero's journey, the hero's journey. They're on the hero's journey. We see this a lot in narratives and stories, movies, etc. But we also see this just with everyday life too. Because to live is to, I think, just in and of itself, just being and living is overcoming, is standing up, is sort of fighting against the current, fighting against the wave. Um, there's going to be things that you come up against or that you're confronted with, much of which might be your own stuff, which I'll get into here a little bit later. But the point is that if you're living life, shit's going to happen. And we know this. And those of us that have lived long enough definitely know this. Like, there's no getting out of life without being, hit with something, whether it's loss or grief or separation, divorce, some sort of snafu, some sort of moment where we're just, we find ourselves in a situation that doesn't really bode well for us. And, how do we deal with that? Or how do we allow for redemption in ourselves and in our lives? And how do we continue and carry on and move forward despite that? I think because it's so ubiquitous, it's so common to have redemption, and that it's been talked about in so many different ways by so many different people, and throughout time, millennia, that there's a reason for this. And what let me ask you this, and this is just something to consider, maybe something you might want to comment on or reflect upon in the comment section, or if nothing else, just put it in your thought bank. But what how would life be if redemption wasn't a thing? I mean, I really want you to think about this. And let me expound that a little bit further. How would redemption be, or excuse me, how would life be if redemption wasn't possible? Because what is life without the hope of being redeemed? Because imagine a life in which you make a mistake, you make a really poor judgment or decision, whatever it might be, you have fallen down in some way, and maybe by your own doing. And imagine that, and imagine going through just the pain, shame, embarrassment, and guilt of that, and then never being able to think or hope for the possibility or the opportunity of being redeemed on the other side of that, of being able to live life beyond that. I don't think, because we live life and we're human, and because we do make mistakes and errors, and we are imperfect and flawed, I don't think we can live life and not make mistakes, because part of living is making mistakes. Whether intentional or not, we're going to make mistakes. Therefore, we're going to, well, we all ask for some sort of comeuppance, or, we ask for grace and patience and understanding and all those kinds of things when we have those moments where we're not our best, or that we've made a really bad decision or choice. We've behaved or acted poorly. What if that's not on the table? And this is something I've really pondered, because what's the alternative? Really. I mean, what's the alternative? Let's say you mess up really, really bad, and it really has kind of damaged and tainted and besmirched your reputation. Let's say your reputation takes a pretty hefty hit. Well, what do you do? Do you just sort of swallow that and not get up? Do you just lay down? Do you try to, as much as you possibly can, isolate yourself from the entire world and reality and others, and try to recluse yourself from everybody and everything? Do you hide away in shame? Do you let your shame and guilt and embarrassment totally cripple you and totally paralyze you to the point where you can't live, that you don't want to be anymore? Uh, and I won't go there, but I think you kind of know, like, the extreme side of that, and where I'm kind of getting to when I really think about the far end of that line of logic. So I guess what I'm getting at is it's not only redemption, it's the potential and the possibility and the opportunity of redemption. Because we are going to make mistakes. We are going to do things that, whether we know it or not, or realize it in the moment or not, is not in our best. It's not in our best interest. It's not maybe in the best interest of others. And, we're going to do things. So, how do we make room and space for redemption? Because we're all going to need it. We're all going to ask for it at some point to varying degrees. So, how do we get comfortable with the idea that we need redemption? And I would venture to guess, as I'm saying this, that maybe some of you are thinking, well, I don't really think everybody deserves redemption. I think there's some people who have done some really nefariously horrible, heinous things that don't deserve any kind any kind of chance, any kind of opportunity, any kind of redemption in any kind of way. And to you I say, have you really thought that all the way through? Have you really considered that? And let's go back to my previous video about empathy. Have you really empathized with somebody to a point in which you have understood their plight? Have you really understood their entire plight? Now, don't get me wrong. I think redemption and how much redemption somebody is allowed, and how fruitful the other side of the transformation looks, it varies. It depends. I mean, there are some things that, yeah, I mean, there's some doors that might close if you've done some really horrific, malicious things to other people, especially. There are some things that people, unfortunately, may never be willing to grant you that. But despite that, in my humble opinion, I feel like most people deserve redemption to some extent. I really do. Because I kind of know this firsthand. And I've been kicking around the idea of posting this video for quite some time, because I knew that, for myself personally, it was going to be a bit of a ringer for me. Because it hits home, it hits close, and it's very much front and center for me right now. And I guess that's part of the reason why I want to get this out right now, right here, because I am in a place myself right now where I just feel like, I feel like I'm only here right now because I believe and have come to believe that redemption is possible. I found myself, with my reality existentially shattered about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and experienced something that kind of blew my world up and blew my sense of self up in a lot of different ways. And it has challenged every aspect of how I see everything, but most notably how I see myself and how I view myself and how my whole history, who I've been, how I've been, my relationships, you name it. The last couple years have really confronted, I guess, what you could call my shadow and my unconscious part of self. So it has been one heck of a ride. And if you've ever been there or you yourself are there right now, I think you know what I'm talking about. And you also know that it's not easy. And I'm I'll just be real with you. There were days early on, into the initial stages and days where, the fallout of what had just happened, where I was completely wrecked. I mean, I was completely wrecked. And to the point where, I was depressed. I was really depressed, and depressed in a kind of way that I've never felt before. I've always sort of, I guess you could say, had low grade depression, kind of that general threat of depression that just kind of is always sort of lingering. It's always sort of in the background. It's there, but it's not, you're still living, you're still doing things, you have a smile on your face, and you're functioning and all that, but this depression that I experienced a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, was the kind of depression that ached my soul. It was a soul level depression. And it was, to use a word, chronic. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to wake up. And I went through that whole ordeal where I sort of had to fake my way into, continuing to go on for quite some time until faking it did become making it, to use that old cliche. And gradually over time, day by day, I became stronger. I became, a little bit more myself again. But to be completely honest with you, as I sit here right now, I'm still working through a lot of things that happened a year and a half or so ago, and it hasn't been easy. But I I to bring that back to redemption, there was a part of me kind of early on, and I don't know if I used the word in my mind. I don't know if that word came through my mind of redemption, but I was certainly, that's the question I had for myself and what I was asking myself, as I was unable to, get out of bed and, do simple things like brush my teeth and put deodorant on. Um, the general gist of my thoughts and thinking centered around, well, now what? And, you know, how can I ever live with this? How can I ever go forward after this? Am I able and capable of doing what I used to do again? You know, am I able to do what feel I was called to do again? And I just had, just a flood, excuse me, of different ruminations and negative thoughts and thinking that were rampant during that time, and the redemptive, I guess, aspects to those negative thoughts and ruminations were, well, is it possible? Is it possible, and am I worthy? And for a little while there, no BS, I kind of, went the whole self-loathing route where I kind of told myself, I'm not worthy, I'm not capable, I'm not ever going to be accepted again, I'm not ever going to be, right again in the eyes of others, and acknowledged again, and people will never look at me the same. People will maybe hold that against me forever. And I thought the worst of the worst. And I thought of every reason and then some as to why I'm not worthy and deserving of ever having a chance or a shot at redemption. Well, let's flash forward to now, right here. I can say confidently and without any sort of, facade, that not only am I deserving and worthy of redemption, but I will get everything that I lost back. And not only will I get it back, but I have had dreams and visions that I'm not only going to get it back, I'm going to get it back, and then it's going to be even better. I believe that I will come through this, and I am going to come out of this and through this in a much better way, and be a much better man, a person, and be better in every spectrum, in every sense of the way, in every sense of the word. I felt compelled to share that about myself because part of me wanted to get that out, but part of me wants to connect this back to what I'm talking about with all of you, and that is, you're worthy of it. You're worthy of redemption. I know that there's things that maybe you've done, you've said, actions you've taken, behaviors you've exemplified or fallen into. Maybe you've done some things that are really embarrassing. Maybe you've hurt people. Maybe you've hurt a spouse, a partner. Maybe you mistreated your kids at some point in some kind of way. Maybe you lied or cheated. Maybe you're a part of the gossip mill at work. But let me say this. If you are in a place where, shit has hit the fan and now it's time to really stop yourself and look at yourself and go, who the heck am I? Who the F am I? And who in the F have I been? That's a different kind of examination. That's a different kind of exploration. And when you get to that point, you realize, I'm kind of tired of running away from myself. I'm tired of living this way. I know that I haven't been good at times. I know that I haven't been the best person I can be. I know that I have sabotaged or sacrificed my moral and ethical compass. And I know that I've done some things wrong and that I've caused some harm. But you know what? I'm ready to turn around. I'm ready to be better. And I'm ready to do what it takes to be redeemed. And if you're willing to do all those things and you have that that voice in yourself, that internal mechanism within yourself that says those things in so many words, then you're ready, and then you can. And it's different because it operates on a no BS policy. There's a certain amount of BS that you can live with, but I'm convinced that there comes a time or comes a place, a moment in life in which you can't BS yourself anymore. You can BS the world, you can BS others, you can look real good on paper and in person and all that, but deep down something might just be a little bit off, or something might be, you might not be being the kind of person that you think you're being. And so it's time to look. It's time to look within. Now, what does that entail? Well, it entails a whole lot. Because, to look in means, you are now done. You're done lying. You're done putting on a show. You're done running away. You're done denying. You're done pretending. And you're done with a lot of other things that you've been doing for quite some time. Because that's what it takes to have the kind of redemption that I'm talking about. Redemption isn't just getting back what you lost, or getting back in good spirits and getting your good graces back and your reputation back and all that. No, I believe it's a lot deeper than that. Redemption, at its core and at its best, is not just about getting back what you lost. It's about transformation. It's about the kind of transformation that's an overhaul. That's ground zero. Let's just, clean house here on yourself. Let's really get to know yourself in ways that are pretty damn uncomfortable, unsettling, and frankly make you wobble at your own existence. Now that is, and probably does sound scary and frightening and uneasy and unsettling and all those things. I mean, it's certainly, it's not for the faint of heart. And I think that's why a lot of people don't embark on this task, because it's much easier, to live a life of, your projected self, we'll call it, without ever living from your true self, your higher self, your real self. Because yes, you are, if you're doing the work and you're really delving into these deeper aspects of yourself, you're no longer lying to yourself about yourself. You're revisiting old moments and memories where, you really screwed up. You did something, or multiple things even, that were just on the face of it just wrong. And just, there's no really way to justify it or rationalize it or reason it away. You flat messed up. And to kind of have that level of determination to look at those things and sit with those things and not run away from those things when you're doing the work is what propels you. That is what helps transform you. See, it's hard to look at ourselves, because as soon as we normally are, when we become aware of our stuff, what do we normally do? What does a lot of us do, especially those of us who aren't as aware as we might need to be, or lack a certain amount of presence in life, well, we run as soon as something gets a little too close. We turn away, we avoid, you know, sometimes we use things, we drink, we abuse drugs, we watch too much Netflix, binge watch TV, pornography. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we do to avoid running into and meeting our real self, don't we? I know I have. I've taken part in a lot of these different things, and many others, because it really hurts when we get that close to our real self. I mean, there's a bit of pain involved because it means that we have to uh, make our shit real, and our shit gets real when we make it real. And then we really start, metaphorically speaking, we start catching whiffs of that crap, and we go, "Oh, I don't like that," or "That doesn't sit well with me," or "Boy, that that's not that I don't really like that about myself." And then you start, when you start plugging in that kind of way and delving in and shoveling into that crap, you start recognizing aspects of yourself that typically you don't you don't really appreciate, you don't like. You don't like that you've been a certain way or certain ways. You don't like moments where you really screwed up or that you hurt somebody. And maybe you've been avoiding feeling the depth in which you've hurt yourself or hurt others. I mean, how much pain do we experience, or lingering pain do we experience, by the mere fact that we take so many steps to avoid the original source of our pain, the original source of our sorrow and grief? We don't ever really get into the source of our stuff typically. We get into the ancillary tentacle sort of branches, offshoots of the original sources of all our stuff. And then that stuff obviously trickles out into things, and it kind of goes back to what my favorite psychologist of all time, a guy by the name of Carl Jung, last name spelled Jung, talked about in so many different ways. I mean, he talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that has always stuck to me about what he said about the mind and about the unconscious is, this idea that what we don't acknowledge or recognize and bring into our conscious awareness, that basically what we don't acknowledge in our unconscious mind eventually seeps out into reality, into life, into our relationships. And then it kind of becomes actualized and realized, even though it seems to be within us, and that we feel like, oh, we've got it on lock, we've got it on lockdown, right? It's under control. As long as we don't let it get out, we don't let it seep out, we don't let it come through, and we don't show. We certainly don't show it to anybody, for crying out loud. Well, problem is, what we don't acknowledge does then, in fact, become lived, which is eerie, fascinating, and just it just kind of makes your mind go poof, because when I think about my own life and some of the things I've experienced, there have been things that that have been kind of rolling around in my mind, or sort of in my unconscious, maybe my subconscious mind even, and I suddenly, in some kind of way, And it's usually not completely obvious, by the way, but in some kind of way, something shows up, or circumstance or situation that basically puts me, or has uh, squared me up to my unconscious. The thing that I didn't want to confront or deal with in myself, has suddenly shown up in my real life. It's actually being lived out in some kind of way in the world. And then it's like, well, holy crap, what's that about? And how is that now? How did my psyche become matter now? How are my thoughts and feelings and emotions and all my stuff? How is that being now actualized and realized in my own life? And that has happened too many times to say that that is just an accident. And so maybe you have experienced the same thing for yourself. All I know is what we don't bring to our awareness, and that we don't recognize, and we run from, that stuff has a way of catching up with us. And usually when it does catch up with us finally, it's not just a small little tap on the back. It's not a gentle little elbow nudge or anything like that. It kind of knocks your ass down. It knocks you over, and it can kind of it basically can knock your life over, depending on how deep of the kind of stuff that you're dealing with is. And, we all have this stuff, you know? And at some point, I will dedicate a video to more of this kind of stuff, because I think it's also, a key component of what makes us human, what makes us real, and it's unique to all of us. So I will talk about the unconscious more in depth another time. But the unconscious keeps us, I think, from experiencing and allowing us at times to seek out the light. Because in our unconscious, there's a voice that says things like this: well, you're not good enough. Or, hey, silly, hey, fool, you messed up. And so, not only did you mess up big time, but why should you be given another opportunity? You don't deserve it. You haven't earned it. And you're bad. And nobody's going to ever give you a chance again. Nobody's ever going to give you an opportunity. You'll never be accepted again. There's that kind of voice that comes from the unconscious in so many words. And so the unconscious sort of kiboshes, or at least it interferes with, I think, our seeking out for getting in touch with the healing process that, begins to lay out and forecast our redemption process. And redemption, because it's transformative and because it's transformation in the deepest possible way, is, it's like putting on a whole different outfit, a whole different skin. And it's deep. And so, because it's deep and because it's transformative, I believe it's driven and it operates through light. It's that self that you've always wanted to be, and now you're ready to be. And this is a small aside, but I have always pondered and contemplated, when, do we find ourselves on the path to knowing ourselves and the journey to selfhood and all that? Do we find ourselves through trial and error? Do we have to fall down? Do we have to screw up and mess up and all that? Is that just part of the process? Or is it just one of those things we can just sort of almost like manifest, like, hey, I want to be different today. You know, I don't like myself, or I think there's more to me, and I want to be different, and I want to be better, and I want to be who I think I really am, because I haven't really been true and authentic to who I really am. So now I want to be that. I guess my question, or sort of my dissonance with all that is, I'm not sure that we can make that decision consciously. I think sometimes life happens, and life happens in a way in which we have to go through things, experience some things through trial and error, or, messing it up, or falling off, falling down, falling out of grace, whatever. And then we learn. And then we go, okay, now I'm ready. And so I do think that the ground has to be ready for us to transform. But I also think life inches us towards that too. It's not all me. It's not all us. And it's also just not all just happenstance either, or just divine intervention, if you want to call it that. I do think there's a sort of a meeting place between myself and between, we'll call it the divine, where it's like, I'm ready. Now is the world ready? Is reality ready? But I will throw this in real quick, that I do think and do believe that it actually, for the most part, it starts within us. Something within us, and it might not be all us, but it definitely starts as an internal, inner journey, a monologue, a conversation that we have with ourselves, and maybe with something else that says, it's time. It's time for you to be you. It's time for you to quit messing around. To quit stumbling on these things. You're ready. You know where those roads lead you, and you don't want to go back down those streets, those roads, do you? You don't want to revisit those paths because you know where those lead. And there's a place where you get to, like I said earlier, where you cannot look at those and look at your previous ways of going about things and approaching different, outlooks and perspectives in life and go, yeah, that's where I want to go. No, like it's time to get out of your own way. And it's fascinating to think, like, why are some people ready? And how do people get ready for that? And what prepares them for that? Or is simply just living and being enough to prepare us for making that pivot towards who we really are? And that's really, at bottom, what I think redemption's all about. Is it's positioning us and realigning us towards the light of who we really are. So when we ask for redemption, we're not necessarily asking for the acceptance and approval by others necessarily. Yes, that helps. Yes, that's a small part of it. But that's really not the big cheese here. The big cheese is, am I becoming who I really am? And can I feel that? And do I know that deep down? And when you know that you yourself are capable of being redeemed, are deserving of being redeemed, and that you're allowed the grace and the patience of being redeemed, then everything else, I believe, will fall into place as it will. Redemption, although from the outside looking in, it looks like more of a I've got to gain the outside external approval and acceptance by others, and that's going to make me okay again. I do think it's more the other way around, where we have to, within ourselves, tell ourselves and know deep down, yes, I am redeemable. Yes, I can be okay, and I am okay. And it's going to be okay. And I'm going to get through this. I'm going to overcome this. I'm going to learn from this. And I'm going to hopefully be better because of this. This isn't the end of my story. This is the beginning. And when you take that approach, then all mistakes, not saying they're completely null and void or completely excusable, but you realize, I think, like mistakes are part of the journey, part of the process of becoming, of knowing, of understanding, of realization, of being present, and really of being more of who you are at bottom. Because that's really what we're doing here. That's a big part of why we're here. It's a big journey home. And home has a lot to do with what's in us. And all of us have light, I believe, that wants to be known. And maybe a different topic for another day, but I'll throw this in. That's why the importance of removing whatever barriers there are to knowing somebody. I guess it kind of piggybacks a little bit off of the empathy video I did about looking through another's window. That's why it's so important to, as much as we can, understand people, understand them where they're at, not as we are, but understand them as they are and where they're at. So, redemption, no small task. It's not easy. And I believe, from my perspective, we all deserve it. We're all worthy of it. And we all have work to do for it. And I am on my journey. I'm still working. I'm still getting right with myself. I'm still looking at myself, my past self, and going, boy, hmm, boy, what was that about? But there's a part of me that also realizes, and I think maybe you will too, that there comes a point where you have to forgive yourself, or you have to accept those things about yourself that you might not be all that fond of. And that's hard to do. That's not easy. But I do believe that to live life and to live it purposefully and to live it on purpose and to continue to live life, there's a part of us that says, enough is enough. And it's time to stop pretending. It's time to stop avoiding. It's time to stop, running away. It's that part of us that says, I'm here. and I want to be here for real. So that's what I have for today. I appreciate your time, your energy, and taking a moment to listen to this video. And I will continue to work on myself, and I offer the same to you. We're all in this together, and we all have work to do. We all have things and challenges that we can get better at and refine, and continue to evolve as people, as humans. So until next time, I will see all of you later. Take care.